So, here's the beginning of my story. I'm Arthur, and I guess I thought my life was pretty decent. I was just your average hard-working guy, nothing fancy, grinding every day to make sure my family had everything they needed. My wife, Kathy, was a stay-at-home mom by choice. We had 2 kids, a nice house, and a pretty straightforward life in our small town. Now, to give you some context, Kathy and I had been married for 15 years. High school sweethearts, if you can believe it. When we were younger, she used to talk about dreams of traveling, living by the beach, and making memories. But when the reality of life settled in, she seemed to settle too. We both did. I'd be lying if I said I never saw the signs that things were falling apart. I think it all started unraveling a couple of months ago, but the truth is, looking back, there were red flags for years. You just don't want to believe them, right? So when things started to feel off, I did what any decent husband would do. I chalked it up to stress, to the fact that we were both getting older, to the kids. I was too busy being the provider to even consider that she might be, well, cheating. I trusted her completely. Never crossed my mind she'd betray me like that. But one night, Kathy was on her phone way too much. She was laughing and smiling in a way that I hadn't seen in years, and it wasn't because of anything I said or did. That gnawing feeling hit me in the gut, and I started wondering who was on the other side of that screen. I asked her casually, "What's so funny?" She looked at me with a weird little smirk and shrugged it off, saying it was a mom friend from a local group. Something about the way she brushed me off just felt wrong. The next day, she got all dolled up to run errands. She'd never done that before. I let it slide, but I felt that first pang of suspicion. For the next few weeks, her errand trips kept happening, always taking longer than usual. I'd check in with a simple text, "Need anything while you're out?" She'd respond hours later with, "Oh sorry, lost track of time." Or sometimes, no response at all until she got home, saying her phone died or some other lame excuse. When I finally couldn't shake the feeling anymore, I decided to check her phone. I know, privacy, trust, all that. But in that moment, I just needed to know what was really going on. The first time I tried to look at her phone, she was extra guarded, like she knew what I was up to. One night, she left it charging downstairs, which was rare, and I figured it was my chance. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. Honestly, I was hoping I'd find nothing, just proof that I was being paranoid. But there it was, messages from a guy named Rick. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. At first, the text seemed innocent. Small talk about the weather, asking how her day was. But then I saw things that were definitely not meant for just friends. Stuff like, "Last night was amazing," and "Can't wait until next time." My chest tightened, and I could barely breathe. I put her phone back down, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. Didn't know if I should confront her right then or wait until I had more. For a few days, I tried to act normal. I was quiet, but Kathy didn't seem to notice. Or if she did, she didn't care enough to ask. She kept going on her errands, and I could see her excitement every time she picked up her phone. It made me sick, seeing her so wrapped up in someone else. That's when I decided I needed proof, solid proof. Something I could use if this thing blew up, which it was bound to. I started taking screenshots of her messages when I got the chance, forwarding them to myself. Every time she left the room or put her phone down, I was right there, gathering as much as I could without her noticing. I'd never been the kind of guy to snoop around, but the way she was lying right to my face, I couldn't let it go. I started tracking her location too. I knew it was a line I'd never cross in a normal world, but everything felt upside down now. The first time I saw she was at a hotel, yeah, a hotel of all places, I almost drove over there myself. But I didn't. I just saved the location and kept my cool, biding my time until I could gather every last bit of evidence I needed. I don't know how I managed it, but I held out for weeks. After a few weeks of collecting evidence, I knew I couldn't sit on it forever. Every day, pretending things were normal got harder. The kids must have noticed my quietness, though they never said anything. And Kathy? She was either clueless or just didn't care. One night, after the kids were in bed, I sat her down in the living room. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but I didn't miss the flash of annoyance either. Like I was inconveniencing her. "What's this about, Arthur?" she asked, crossing her arms. Defensive already. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I know about you and Rick." Her face went pale for a second, and then she had the nerve to look indignant. "What are you talking about? Rick's just a friend. You're being paranoid." She had that smug look, the same one she gave when she thought she was smarter than me, when she thought she had me fooled. "Just a friend, huh?" I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd saved. The messages, the locations, everything was right there. I watched her face as she realized there was no talking her way out of it. Instead of apologizing or even looking ashamed, she doubled down. "You were spying on me," she snapped, shifting the blame. "I can't believe you don't trust me." "Trust you?" I laughed bitterly. "Kathy, I would have trusted you with my life. I never even thought about looking through your phone until you started lying to my face, until you started sneaking off to God knows where with him. I don't think I'm the one with the trust issue here." Her face hardened, and that's when I realized the Kathy I knew was long gone. She wasn't even sorry. She was just mad she got caught. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms and looking away. "Yes, I'm seeing Rick. And honestly, Arthur, maybe if you weren't so boring and predictable, I wouldn't have needed to find excitement somewhere else." Hearing those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my jaw clench, but I kept my composure. "Is that so?" I replied, voice low and cold. "Well, here's the deal, Kathy. You want out? You want your freedom? You got it. But I'm taking full custody of the kids, and I'll make sure this doesn't ruin my life more than it already has." For once, she looked shaken, realizing maybe things weren't going to go her way. But she didn't say anything. She just stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her, leaving me alone in the silence, wondering how it had come to this. But that was it. I was done with her lies, done with the life I thought we had together. I'd keep my emotions in check for now for the kids, and get through this mess one step at a time. After that night, Kathy and I barely spoke. We were like two strangers living under the same roof, each of us just going through the motions. I knew I needed a plan. I wasn't about to lose everything I'd worked for, especially not my kids. They were the one thing I couldn't afford to let her ruin. The first thing I did was consult a lawyer. I found someone who came highly recommended, a no-nonsense divorce attorney who'd been through more messes than I could imagine. Her name was Linda, and from the moment I walked into her office, she didn't sugarcoat anything. After I explained the situation, Linda leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowed. "Arthur, you've got a strong case here. You've got proof of the affair, and you're the primary breadwinner. If you want custody, I think you can get it. But you need to play it smart from here on out." I nodded, soaking it all in. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, feeling a surge of determination. The last thing I wanted was to be a weekend dad, and I'd be damned if I let Kathy's choices mess up my kids' lives. Linda gave me a list of things to start doing, documenting everything, avoiding any big purchases, and keeping records of all our expenses. She also advised me to stay calm and civil, especially around the kids. She told me it could take months to finalize everything, but as long as I stayed focused, I had a good shot at getting full custody and keeping the house. When I got home that night, Kathy was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely unfazed. I almost laughed at how detached she was from everything going on around her. "Arthur, we need to talk about the house," she said, not even looking up. "I think it's only fair we sell it and split the money." I took a deep breath. "Kathy, this isn't going to work out the way you think. I'm staying in this house with the kids. You're the one who wanted a different life, so go live it with Rick. I'm not budging on this." She rolled her eyes, giving me that familiar look of disdain. "Oh, so now you suddenly care about the kids? You were always too busy working to spend time with them anyway." Her words stung, but I stayed calm. "Funny how I'm the one here every night, making sure they're fed and getting to bed while you're off running errands. Let's not pretend this is about anything but what you want, Kathy." The argument went on like that, both of us throwing barbs back and forth, but I refused to let her get to me. I knew she was just trying to bait me, trying to make me lose my cool. And as much as it burned me to stay calm, I did. For the kids, for myself, and for the case. As things got uglier with Kathy, I knew it was only a matter of time before we had to tell the kids. They'd started noticing the tension, the way their mom and I barely looked at each other. Our oldest, Olivia, was just 10, but she was smart, too smart to not see something was wrong. And Jacob, at 7, was sensitive. I hated the thought of dragging them into this, but I didn't want them getting blindsided either. One evening, after Kathy and I had another round of arguing over who'd keep what, I suggested we sit down with the kids together and explain things. To my surprise, she actually agreed. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe she just didn't care enough to fight me on that one. Either way, we set a time, and I prepared myself for what would probably be the hardest conversation of my life. We sat the kids down in the living room, and I could see the confusion on their faces. Olivia kept glancing back and forth between us, and Jacob sat with his hands in his lap, quiet and nervous. I took a deep breath and started. "Listen, guys," I said, forcing myself to stay steady. "Mom and I have been having some problems, and we're going to be living apart from now on." Olivia's eyes widened. "You mean you're getting divorced?" I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. Kathy chimed in, putting on her best comforting mom voice. "But we both still love you so much," she said, glancing at me like she was expecting backup. "Nothing about that will change." Jacob looked down, his lip quivering. "But why? Did we do something wrong?" That question nearly broke me. I leaned forward and took his hands in mine. "No, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. This has nothing to do with you or your sister. Sometimes grown-ups just can't stay together the way they used to. But I promise you, you'll always have both of us, no matter what." Olivia was looking at Kathy, her face full of questions. "Are you going to live with that other man?" she asked, straight out. Kids don't hold back. Kathy looked caught off guard, fumbling for words. "That's complicated, honey. I just need some time to figure things out." I could see the wheels turning in Olivia's head, her little face tight with hurt. She was taking it all in, processing more than I wanted her to. Jacob was quiet, trying to understand, but I could tell he didn't fully get it yet. After that, the kids went off to their rooms, and I sat there feeling like I just ripped something precious away from them. But I'd done what I had to. They deserved to know. And as painful as it was, I was more determined than ever to protect them, to give them as much stability as I could in the middle of this mess. I'd told myself I'd be the steady one for them, the parent they could count on. Kathy could go off with Rick or whoever else, but the kids? They were my priority now, and I'd make sure they knew it every single day. After breaking the news to the kids, Kathy moved out pretty quickly. She stayed with a friend to figure things out, as she put it. We didn't talk much beyond the basics. Every time we exchanged a few words, it was tense, but I kept my cool. She decided she wanted out, and I wasn't about to let her waltz back in whenever she pleased. The kids were adjusting, but I could tell Olivia and Jacob were shaken. They'd ask when they'd see their mom, and I did my best to keep things positive, even though the whole thing made me sick. Kathy stopped by once a week, and though it threw the kids off, I could see they were trying to adapt. And I knew I had to keep my focus. This divorce wasn't just about us. It was about the kids' future, and I couldn't risk leaving any part of that up to chance. My lawyer, Linda, had advised me to go for full custody. "You have a strong case," she'd said. "Document everything. Keep a record of your time with the kids, her absences, and anything else that might show the court who's really been there for them." So that's what I did. I kept a journal of every night I read to them, every soccer practice and school event I showed up to. I made sure the house stayed as stable as possible for Olivia and Jacob, routine dinners, homework, bedtime stories. Anything to make life feel even a little bit normal. Kathy, on the other hand, didn't seem too interested in making things stable. When she did come over, it was for quick visits with the kids, where she'd bring them new toys or treats, like she was buying their affection. It hurt to watch her swoop in with gifts and sweet talk, but I just kept reminding myself that consistency, not bribery, was what they needed. The court date finally came, and I was ready. I had everything documented, all the evidence Linda had advised me to gather. Kathy showed up with her own lawyer and did her best to play the part of the doting mother. But when her lawyer tried to argue that she'd been involved and present for the kids, I could see her facade crack a little. The truth was, she'd been checked out for a long time, first emotionally, then physically. Linda presented our case calmly and clearly, laying out every piece of evidence. The judge listened, nodded, and finally, after what felt like a lifetime, granted me full custody with limited visitation rights for Kathy. I could see her shock. She'd thought she could waltz in and out whenever she wanted. But not this time. Not when our kids' future was on the line. Leaving the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt like things were moving in the right direction. Kathy's choices had led us here, but I'd fought to make sure Olivia and Jacob had a stable home, and now I had the chance to give them exactly that. After the custody decision, Things finally settled into some kind of routine. I had the kids full-time now, which was both exhausting and grounding. Every morning started with breakfast chaos, Olivia insisting on toast with jam but only if it was spread right to the edges, and Jacob being half asleep, barely able to keep his eyes open until he had his cereal. Little things like that kept me going. Kathy's visits became less frequent. At first, she'd come by every week, but after a few months, it turned into every other week, then once a month. The kids didn't say much about it, but I could tell they felt her absence, especially Olivia. She'd try to act strong, but I'd catch her staring at the door sometimes, like she was waiting for Kathy to come back. And Jacob? He'd gotten quiet about his mom altogether. It hurt to see them trying to adjust to something so unfair, but I kept showing up every day, doing my best to make up for her absence. During this time, I found myself leaning on people more than I ever had before. I'd always been a handle-it-yourself type, but this was different. My boss, Rachel, was one of the first to notice something was off. She called me into her office one day, closed the door, and asked if I was okay. I shrugged, gave a half-hearted, "I'm managing," but Rachel wasn't buying it. "Arthur, if you need some extra time or help with anything, let me know," she said, her voice genuine. "We've all been there." Over the next few weeks, she'd check in on me now and then, even offering to let me work from home more often. Her understanding helped me keep it together, especially on the hard days when I felt like I was barely getting by. She had a way of keeping things light without ignoring what I was going through. Then there was Rose. She was a local police officer who I'd met a few years back at a community event. We'd always been friendly, saying hello in passing, but I hadn't seen much of her until she showed up on a domestic disturbance call for my neighbor. We ran into each other afterward, and she could tell right away something was weighing on me. Rose had a way of listening without pushing, so I ended up telling her about the divorce, the kids, everything. She nodded, her face serious but kind. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm around," she offered. We started grabbing coffee now and then, and those conversations with her were a relief. She'd tell me stories about her time on the force, the crazy calls, and the rough days, and somehow it made my situation feel a little less overwhelming. Rose understood struggle in a way that felt real, and having her around gave me a sense of support I didn't even know I needed. As the weeks went on, we grew closer, but it wasn't rushed or forced. Just two people, both a little bruised by life, finding comfort in each other's company. I wasn't looking for anything serious, and I think she understood that. We were both just trying to get by, and for a while, we helped each other do just that. For the first time since this all started, I felt like I could breathe again. The house felt a little warmer, the weight on my shoulders a little lighter. I didn't know where things with Rose would go, but I was grateful for her support, for Rachel's kindness, and for the small steady steps I was finally making toward a new kind of normal. As Rose and I spent more time together, things naturally shifted between us. It started with those simple coffee chats, then turned into dinners with the kids, and eventually, the kids began asking when Rose would come over again. They liked her easygoing nature, the way she'd joke around and actually listen to them. She brought warmth to our house in a way I hadn't realized was missing. One weekend, Rose suggested taking the kids on a day trip to a nearby park. We spent the whole day hiking, playing soccer, and letting the kids run wild on the playground. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen them laugh so freely. Watching them race each other up the jungle gym, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. Like maybe things were going to be okay. After we got the kids to bed that night, Rose stayed for a while. We ended up on the porch, just talking under the stars. The air was cool, and she pulled her jacket around her, smiling in that way that always seemed to put me at ease. "It's been nice," I admitted, looking over at her. "Having you around. You're good with them. With all of us, really." She shrugged, smiling softly. "You've got good kids, Arthur. You've done a great job, especially with everything you've been through." Hearing that, well, it hit me. No one had said that to me, not like that. I felt a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in years, and before I knew it, I leaned over and kissed her. It wasn't planned, but it felt right. She kissed me back, and for a moment, everything else faded away. Over the next few months, Rose became a steady presence in our lives. I didn't want to rush things, especially with the kids still adjusting, but Rose was understanding and patient. We kept things easy, and the kids took to her naturally. She'd help with dinner, join in on family game nights, and just be there in a way I hadn't expected anyone to be. But life had a way of throwing curveballs, and one day Rose sat me down, looking a little hesitant. She told me she'd been offered a transfer, an opportunity to work with a specialized unit in another state. It was a big career move, something she'd been working toward for years. My heart sank. I knew what this meant, but I couldn't be selfish. She deserved to go after what she'd worked so hard for. We sat there in silence for a moment before she spoke. "I don't want to leave you and the kids, Arthur," she said quietly. "But this is something I need to do for myself." I nodded, swallowing back the disappointment. "I get it, Rose. You've done so much for us, and I'll always be grateful for that. You deserve this." We parted ways on good terms, no anger or resentment. We promised to keep in touch, and we did, at first. But life moved on, and slowly, the calls and texts grew less frequent. It was bittersweet, but I was thankful for the time we'd had. Rose had helped me heal, helped me see that maybe there was something better out there waiting for me. And once she left, I focused on moving forward, not just for me, but for Olivia and Jacob. They'd seen me rebuild from the ground up, and I wanted to show them that no matter what life throws at you, you keep going. With Rose gone, I threw myself into work and parenting, keeping things steady for Olivia and Jacob. Life was simpler, maybe even a little lonely, but it felt good to have structure. My job at the company where Rachel was my boss became more than just a paycheck. It became a place I could refocus, even find a little escape from everything that had happened. Rachel, as usual, was supportive, always checking in to see how things were going with the kids. One evening after a long workday, she asked if I wanted to grab a quick dinner. It wasn't unusual. We'd grabbed coffee or a meal here and there, and it was nice to unwind without thinking too much. Over dinner, we talked about work, the kids, and eventually, she opened up about her own life. She'd been married once briefly, but things hadn't worked out. She'd spent most of her time focused on her career, and while she didn't regret it, there was something wistful in her voice when she spoke about family. I could tell she'd made some sacrifices along the way. "You know," she said with a small smile, "watching you with Olivia and Jacob, it makes me think, maybe I missed something along the way. You're a really great dad, Arthur. They're lucky to have you." Her words hit me in a way I didn't expect. Hearing that from her, someone I respected and looked up to, felt like validation I didn't know I needed. I looked at her, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. "Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate that. Honestly, I couldn't have kept it together without your support." Our friendship continued to deepen over the next few months. She started joining me and the kids occasionally for dinners or outings. It was nothing romantic, just a good friendship, steady and reliable. She brought a sense of calm stability and laughter back into our lives, and the kids adored her. Olivia would ask when Aunt Rachel was coming over, and Jacob loved telling her about school and his latest hobbies. One Friday night, after a particularly long week, Rachel invited us to her place for a homemade dinner. She went all out, making a full spread that put my weeknight casseroles to shame. The kids were thrilled, and after dinner, they played in her backyard, giving us a quiet moment alone in the kitchen. "I've got to admit, I missed this," she said, smiling as she dried a plate. "Having family around, that sense of home. I haven't felt that in a long time." The way she looked at me, it was softer, more vulnerable. I felt a pull, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "You're part of our family now, Rachel. The kids, they see you as family." "And so do I said, feeling the truth of my words as they left my mouth. Rachel smiled, and for a moment, it felt like the world around us faded. I leaned forward, and before I knew it, we were sharing a quiet, gentle kiss. It wasn't rushed or intense, it was just right. The kind of kiss that felt like coming home. After that night, things between us shifted, but in a natural, comfortable way. We didn't rush anything, we just kept building on what we already had. Over time, Rachel became a bigger part of our lives, joining us for family dinners, holidays, and lazy Sundays in the backyard. The kids loved her, and she was patient and kind with them in a way that felt like second nature. Slowly, life settled into a rhythm that felt real, grounded. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building something new, something solid. And as the months went by, I started to realize that Rachel and I weren't just two people leaning on each other anymore. We were becoming a family, one steady day at a time. Over the next year, life with Rachel became more than I'd ever hoped for. She was there through everything: Olivia's school play, Jacob's soccer games, family birthdays, even those rough nights when one of the kids was sick, and we were up half the night. Rachel didn't just show up, she was fully there, filling the cracks that had been left in all of us. One night, as we were sitting on the back porch, watching the kids play in the yard, the thought hit me. I wanted this forever. I wanted to make us official, to turn this little family we'd created into something lasting. I glanced over at Rachel, feeling that familiar warmth, and I realized she was watching me too, smiling in that gentle way she had. "Rachel," I said, my voice steady, "I can't imagine my life without you. You've been more than I could ever ask for, not just for me, but for Olivia and Jacob too. I know this isn't how I thought life would turn out, but I wouldn't change a single thing." Her eyes softened, and she reached over, taking my hand. "Arthur, I feel the same way. You and the kids, you've become my home. I love all of you so much." I took a deep breath, reaching into my pocket and pulling out a small box. I saw her eyes widen, and before she could say anything, I opened it, revealing the ring inside. "Rachel, will you marry me?" She looked at me, a little misty-eyed, and nodded. "Yes, Arthur. Absolutely yes." We laughed and kissed, and before long, the kids came running over, curious about what was going on. When we told them we were getting married, Olivia squealed with excitement, and Jacob wrapped his arms around both of us, his face beaming. They'd already thought of Rachel as family, and now it was just official. The months leading up to the wedding were full of planning and laughter, with the kids just as excited as we were. We kept things simple, just family and a few close friends in a small ceremony. When the day finally came, it was perfect. Olivia walked down the aisle as my flower girl, and Jacob stood proudly by my side, looking sharp in his little suit. Rachel looked beautiful, more radiant than I'd ever seen her, and when we exchanged our vows, I could feel the last pieces of our lives finally coming together. That day marked the start of something new. We were no longer just three people holding it together. We were a family, bound by love, trust, and everything we'd been through. Rachel moved in with us officially, and life fell into a new, joyful rhythm. We celebrated holidays together, took family trips, and made 1,000 small, ordinary memories that turned our house into a real home. As time passed, we began to talk about expanding our family. Rachel and I both loved being parents, and the thought of adding to our little clan felt right. We talked to Olivia and Jacob, and they were thrilled by the idea of having a little brother or sister. And soon enough, we got the news we were hoping for: Rachel was pregnant. The kids were over the moon, and every day became a whirlwind of preparations. We painted the nursery together, and the kids helped pick out baby names, filling the room with tiny toys and clothes. When our little girl Emily was born, she brought even more light and laughter into our lives. Watching Olivia and Jacob dote on her, seeing Rachel as a mother, it all felt like a dream come true. Our family was complete, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. A few years passed, and life settled into a steady, happy rhythm. Watching Olivia and Jacob grow, along with our little Emily, filled every day with purpose. I felt content, something I hadn't thought possible after everything that had happened. Rachel and I had built a life that felt unshakable. Then one evening, as I was getting home from work, I saw someone standing outside the house. It took me a second to recognize her, but there was no mistaking who it was: Kathy. She looked rough. Her hair was disheveled, and she wore that look of desperation I'd only seen a handful of times. My stomach twisted as she walked toward me, eyes darting, clearly uneasy. "Arthur," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Part of me wanted to slam the door and tell her to leave, but she looked lost. We stood there for a few moments before I finally asked, "What's going on, Kathy?" She hesitated, then looked down, clearly struggling. "Things didn't work out with Rick. I made a lot of mistakes, Arthur. I hurt you, and I know that. But I'm trying to get back on my feet now." She swallowed, her voice shaky. "I haven't seen the kids in so long, and I was hoping you'd let me spend some time with them." Hearing her mention the kids made me tense up. They were thriving without her, and I wasn't about to let her waltz in and out of their lives again. "Look, Kathy," I said, trying to keep my tone even, "the kids have moved on. They're doing well, and they don't need more disruptions. I can't let you come back into their lives just because things didn't work out for you." She nodded, looking defeated. "I understand, Arthur, I do. But I just want to try, even if it's supervised or on a limited basis. I need this chance, for them and for me. I've been going to therapy, working on myself. I know I've messed up, but I'm trying to make things right. I could feel Rachel watching from inside the house, and after a moment, she came to the door, giving me a supportive nod. After everything, I couldn't ignore Kathy's plea. We discussed the possibility of supervised visits, something gradual so she couldn't just disappear again. Rachel and I would be there every step of the way, ensuring that the kids' well-being came first. The first visit was awkward, to say the least. Olivia, now a teenager, was hesitant and guarded. Jacob, a bit younger, was polite but distant. They both remembered the pain and the confusion of her leaving, and it was clear they were wary of letting her back in. Kathy tried, though. She apologized to them, stayed patient, and didn't push. Over time, they began to warm up to her, but it was a slow process. Eventually, after several months of supervised visits, the kids seemed to accept her presence without resentment. Kathy, surprisingly, seemed committed. She attended her therapy sessions and respected the boundaries we'd set up. After about a year of visits, Kathy approached me with a new idea, one that threw me for a loop. "Arthur, I'd like to help out with the kids, maybe even as a nanny," she said, her tone hopeful. "I know it's unconventional, but this way, I could be there without disrupting what you and Rachel have built. I want to be part of their lives in any way that's helpful." I looked at Rachel, who seemed as surprised as I was. We talked it over, considering the implications. After everything we'd been through, letting Kathy back into our lives, even in a limited role, was a huge decision. But ultimately, we agreed. If she was willing to work her way back into the kids' lives responsibly, maybe it was worth a try. We set strict boundaries and made sure she understood that her role would be focused solely on the kids' well-being. Surprisingly, Kathy took on the role with grace. She was punctual, kept to her boundaries, and even helped with homework and activities. Over time, the kids adjusted to having her around again, not as a mother figure exactly, but as a part of their world. Our household might have been unconventional, but it worked. Kathy found a role that fit, and with therapy and continued support, I found a way to make peace with the past. I couldn't say we'd become friends, but we'd found a way to coexist for the sake of the family. Having Kathy around as a nanny was an adjustment, to say the least. There were days when the old anger would flare up, when I'd catch a glimpse of her reading to Jacob or helping Olivia with her homework, and I'd remember everything we'd gone through. But the kids seemed to appreciate her presence, even if it was a quieter role. It wasn't easy, but Rachel and I kept our commitment to making this arrangement work for them. Rachel, as always, was supportive. I admired her strength and patience. She'd been the one to gently remind me that people can change, and that letting Kathy find a stable place in the kids' lives was about them, not about us. Rachel never showed jealousy or resentment. She understood the importance of forgiveness, even if it was mostly for our own peace of mind. The kids had adapted to their new version of a family, and the last thing I wanted was to add any more tension to their lives. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Rachel and I sat together on the couch, talking about how far we'd come. "You know," she said softly, taking my hand, "I never imagined life would turn out like this. But I wouldn't change it. It's not a perfect family, but it's ours." I looked at her, feeling a wave of gratitude. "I wouldn't change it either. You're the one who helped us rebuild. You made this a home, Rachel." As the months went on, Kathy found a steady rhythm in her role as the kids' nanny. She was reliable, and for the first time in years, she seemed genuinely focused on them. She still struggled with her own issues, but she'd come a long way. The kids noticed it too, and it helped mend some of the wounds she'd left. One day, after Kathy had taken Emily to a park nearby, she came back to the house, looking reflective. She hesitated at the door before speaking. "Arthur, I just wanted to say, thank you for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "We're doing what's best for the kids, Kathy. Just keep doing what you're doing." That evening, I had a long conversation with Rachel. Letting Kathy back into our lives hadn't been easy for either of us, but it had brought a kind of peace neither of us had expected. Our life together was solid, built on trust and resilience, and adding a little forgiveness had only strengthened it. Rachel and I knew that we'd created a unique, sometimes complicated, but ultimately fulfilling life for our family. The kids seemed happier too, having a sense of wholeness with both their parents involved, even if it wasn't in the traditional way. Olivia and Jacob saw their mom regularly now, and even little Emily had grown to know Kathy as a part of her life. I knew it was unconventional, but we were making it work. For the first time, I felt a real sense of closure. Kathy had her place, the kids had stability, and Rachel and I had each other. What started as a nightmare had evolved into something unexpected, something that worked. And finally, I was okay with that. Over time, our household found a comfortable routine. It was strange, but the arrangement actually brought a certain calm to our lives. Kathy continued to be there for the kids as their nanny, but she respected the boundaries we'd put in place. And as the days turned into months, I realized that we'd become something that looked like a family, even if it didn't match the traditional picture I once had in mind. I could see the impact this had on Olivia and Jacob. They became more relaxed, their confidence growing now that both their parents were in their lives, even in this unusual way. Olivia had been quiet and reserved after Kathy's departure, but now she was opening up, laughing more freely, and sharing stories from school. Jacob, too, had blossomed. He was doing better in school, had started playing sports, and even began inviting friends over more often. It was a relief to see them thriving. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Rachel and I sat outside on the porch, enjoying the cool night air. She held my hand, her thumb tracing gentle circles on my knuckles, a gesture of comfort that had become second nature between us. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "I never thought I'd get to a place where I could feel content, even with everything that's happened." Rachel looked at me, her eyes warm. "You've done an incredible job, Arthur. It wasn't easy, but you've created a stable, loving home for them. And," she added with a soft smile, "for me too." I squeezed her hand, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "You're the reason we're here, Rachel. I don't think I'd have made it through without you. You gave us all something to hold on to." We sat there in the quiet, each of us reflecting on the journey we'd been through. Rachel had been my anchor through the storm, my unwavering partner. And now, as I looked back, I saw how much I'd grown, how much we both had. I wasn't the man Kathy had betrayed anymore. I was stronger, more resilient, and I'd rebuilt my life with Rachel by my side. The next day, Kathy asked if she could talk to me alone. I was hesitant, but we stepped outside to the porch. She seemed nervous, her gaze shifting between the floor and the trees in the yard. "Arthur," she began, "I know I've said it before, but I really am sorry. I've done a lot of reflecting, and I know how badly I hurt you. And the kids. I'm trying to make peace with what I did." I nodded, feeling a mixture of emotions. Her words felt sincere, but there was still a scar that wouldn't fully heal. "Thank you, Kathy. It's good to hear that. But you know, the most important thing is that you're here now, doing right by the kids. That's what matters to me." She smiled, looking relieved. "I know. And I want you to know, I'm grateful for this second chance, to be there for them, even if it's in a different role." That conversation was a turning point. I couldn't forget what she'd done, but I could see that she was trying, that she was genuinely committed to making things right. I didn't need her to be perfect, I just needed her to keep showing up for the kids. After that, life took on an even deeper sense of peace. Kathy was part of our world, but Rachel and I were the ones at the heart of it, guiding and supporting our children through all the ups and downs. We had an odd sort of balance, but it worked. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free from the weight of the past. I'd found acceptance, not just of Kathy's choices, but of my own, and the life we'd built in the wake of everything that had happened. As we settled into this new version of family life, small traditions began to emerge. Every Sunday, Rachel and I would make breakfast together, and the kids would join in, Olivia flipping pancakes, Jacob scrambling eggs, and little Emily trying to mix the batter with a big wooden spoon. Those mornings were filled with laughter, the smell of coffee, and the simple joy of being together. One Sunday, as we were cleaning up, Kathy came by to pick up the kids for a planned outing. It had become a part of our new arrangement that she would occasionally spend the afternoon with them, giving them the chance to connect with her outside the house. I could tell the kids enjoyed it, and Rachel and I got a few hours to ourselves, which was something we hadn't had much of lately. That afternoon, with the kids out, Rachel suggested we start a new project, something just for us. We'd talked about doing some light renovations on the house to make it feel even more like a home we'd built together. As we painted the walls and rearranged the furniture, we talked about the future, about trips we'd take with the kids, places we'd want to show them, and new experiences we hoped to give them. Our conversation shifted naturally to adding more traditions and family rituals, like movie nights, hikes, and holiday celebrations. We both wanted to make sure the kids grew up with the kind of memories they could look back on and smile about. And more than that, We wanted to create a sense of home for them that felt secure, regardless of the past. By the time Kathy returned with the kids, the house was filled with that fresh paint smell, and we'd rearranged the living room. Olivia and Jacob ran in, eyes wide with excitement at the small changes, and Emily toddled behind, laughing as she explored the new space. Kathy looked around and smiled, nodding with approval. "You guys have really made this place yours," she said, her tone thoughtful. Rachel responded, her voice kind. "It's a team effort. We want this to be a place where they can feel safe and loved." I could see Kathy take that in, and there was a genuine look of appreciation on her face. It was as if, for the first time, she truly understood how deeply we cared about creating a positive environment for the kids. She didn't say anything more, but her expression spoke volumes. She understood the depth of the commitment we'd made, not just as parents, but as a family. As the months went on, these small moments and shared routines turned into a foundation of stability and love for the kids. We'd established a blend of family time with Rachel, moments with Kathy, and even new traditions that we all came to look forward to. Our lives didn't look like a conventional family's, but in some ways, it felt even stronger because we'd all made the choice to put the kids first, to build something stable from the broken pieces. On holidays, we would invite Kathy over for dinner, allowing the kids to feel everyone's presence and love without the divide of past mistakes. It was unconventional, sure, but it worked. The kids seemed happier, their confidence growing as they saw all of us working together to make their lives whole. One Christmas, as we gathered around the tree, the kids beaming with excitement, Rachel took my hand, and I looked around at the life we'd created, a life built from struggle, forgiveness, and love. It was far from the path I'd envisioned for myself years ago, but it felt richer, fuller, and more meaningful because of it. In those small, simple moments, watching the kids unwrap gifts, laughing with Rachel, and even sharing a glance with Kathy across the room, I realized we'd finally reached a place of peace. We weren't bound by the past anymore. We'd forged a future that felt like home, and for the first time, I felt truly grateful for the journey that had brought us here. With time, our lives found a steady rhythm. The holidays, family dinners, and Sunday breakfasts became woven into the fabric of our days, grounding us all. The kids flourished in the stability we'd created, and it was clear they felt loved by everyone around them. Kathy, too, had settled comfortably into her role, maintaining the boundaries we'd set but being present in a way that felt genuine. One evening, after the kids were asleep, Rachel and I sat quietly on the porch, watching the stars. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we didn't need words to fill the silence. There was a deep shared understanding between us now, a quiet acknowledgement of all we'd gone through to get here. Rachel looked up at me and smiled, her eyes soft. "I think we've made it, Arthur. I think we're finally home." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle over me. "Yeah," I said quietly, "I think we are." In that moment, with the peace of our little world around us, I knew we'd come full circle. We had created something stronger than I'd ever imagined, a life filled with love, forgiveness, and hope. And as we sat there together, looking out at everything we'd built, I felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead.